Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to another episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. So I decided to take this week, episode 52, as a chance to share my thoughts on being at the 1-year mark with the podcast. Those of you that have been with me from the beginning know that stepping into this space was definitely not easy for me. I had this idea. I felt like I was being called to put this together. I knew I wanted to try the podcasting platform, but it scared the crap out of me, if I'm being honest. Not knowing all the answers, not knowing about the editing and pulling the music together and creating cover art, where to publish it. And there's a lot of pieces to it. All things you can learn, but all things I hadn't been exposed to before. And for that reason, and because I really had no idea what it would take, where it would lead, if people would listen, if I would be judged, if it would be a complete fail. All those things scared the crap out of me. Taking on something like this at 53 seemed pretty daunting. I was definitely stepping out of my comfort zone. Fortunately, the universe didn't let that stop me and reminded me over and over and over that all it would take me is to take one step at a time. Just pick the next best step and move forward and be open to wherever the path led me. So I did. And what I learned was I didn't need to know it all. I didn't need to worry about what it would look like a year from now. I didn't need to worry about all the things that could possibly go wrong and all the things that might get in the way. I just needed to continue to take a step forward. And this lesson has really been a big change for me, and it's helped me in other areas of my life too. Overthinking and trying to prepare for all the what ifs, it's a complete waste of time. Yes, I still believe in being prepared. You definitely have to do your research. You definitely have to do some training potentially. It depends what you're doing. But there's a difference between being prepared and using all your energy to get stuck in the land of what ifs and swirl around and just thinking about it and being so concerned with not having all the answers. I share this with all of you because I want to encourage you to be brave, to step out of your comfort zone, to try something different. I know there's a few of you that are on the cusp of that really are thinking about doing something different, some in jobs, some in personal, some in hobbies. And I just want to say, take the step, lean into it. Whatever you're dreaming that might go wrong, it probably won't. And if it does, what's the worst that can happen? Whatever thing comes to your mind as far as I can't because, I want you to ask yourself, is that really true? What would happen if you did? What would happen if that thing, the thing you're most worried about, came true? Would it really be the end of the world? If you're really honest with yourself, I think for the most part, you're going to find out that you don't have much to lose and you have a lot to gain. So please, let me urge you, step forward. Whatever it is you're thinking about, take that risk and step into it. But all right, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. That's not the only thing I wanted to talk about in week 52, the year in review. I, of course, wanted to think back and think about all the different episodes and all the people that I've connected with and the messages that we've shared. I often get asked what my favorite episode is, and to be honest, I really struggle with that answer. There's so many people that have so much expertise and so much inspiration to share that I feel lucky to have met everyone that I've worked with. And I feel even luckier that I've been able to share that message with you guys. So that said, I am going to go back and just touch on a couple of the episodes and people and messages that really stand out for me when I think back. So I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. And I would be remiss not to include the first episode that I actually did. And it was a look at Carry On Warrior, The Power of Embracing Your Messy, Beautiful Life by Glennon Doyle. And what I loved about that book and why I used it to frame up my first episode is because it stands for everything that the show was about. It talks about how life is messy and it's complicated, but it's wonderful all at the same time. And no one goes through life without some kind of mess. But that doesn't mean our life has to suck or we have to be stuck in the negativity or the past. We learn from it and we make peace with it and we move on, and life can be really beautiful. Next, let's talk about unicorns. So I did an episode pretty early on called Kill Those Unicorns, a conversation with life coach Janine Darceau. And this episode still resonates with me because of the analogy that Janine uses. So we all know a unicorn is an imaginary fictional thing, but the idea of it, it's like this perfect, hard to find creature that we often are on the lookout for. And Janine uses this as an analogy to talk about the ways in which we look for external things and external validation, and we chase those things because we think finding them or achieving them will create happiness and fulfillment in our lives. And it goes along with those sayings like, I'll be happy when I make more money. I'll be satisfied when I get the next award or the next promotion. I'll be happy when I can take that big job or that big vacation. The thing is, it's never going to happen. And those things will never bring us happiness or fulfillment. And as some say, it's an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. And we have to fill ourselves up and not look outward. And really learning that lesson really changes things for you. And for myself, this was a big area of awareness and focus over the last few years, learning to get my validation internally and learning to be happy and grateful for the little things in my life versus chasing the next big thing was really a game changer. And it's so in line with Janine's message and the work she does. I really feel like this would resonate with so many people. And if you haven't listened to this episode, I suggest you go back and listen to it because there's some really great conversational topics there. Another one of my very early episodes that come to mind is titled Channel Your Inner 5-Year-Old and So Much More, a conversation with Fiona Martiman. And this conversation was so great in so many ways. There was a lot of learning to listen to your body. There was a lot about emotional eating, creating a healthy relationship with food and exercise. And while I loved all of that, and those topics are near and dear to my heart and to this community's, truly my favorite part of this episode was her message around channeling your inner 5-year-old. And the point that she makes in that topic was around thinking back to either yourself or your interaction with a child and how they're not scared to try anything. You can ask a kid to, what's your favorite superhero? Act like a superhero you want to be, or act like an animal you want to be, or, hey, go do this thing. I mean, whatever it is, a new activity, pretending to be somebody, interacting in a different way. Most kids, and yes, I know there's exceptions, but most kids will jump right in without hesitation and they'll just start doing it. They don't stop and question what if I fail? What if I look dumb? What if I don't know how to do it? I mean, you can ask a kid to pretend to be an animal or a prehistoric dinosaur, which they know nothing about, and somehow they figure out how to act like it, right? They just try it. They're not scared to just do it. And I think her point about reminding ourselves to just let go of the what ifs, let go of the worrying about what others will think, jumping in and just trying something without worrying about all the pieces, so important, and a message that we can get from a typical 5-year-old. And I just think about that analogy often, and I think about how true it is. And it makes me remember when I feel like I'm getting about nervous to try something. It allows me to kind of tap into that memory of, hey, if I was my 5-year-old self, would I care? And then I can often kind of talk the chatter down and move forward with it. So I love that concept. Again, I love the whole podcast. There's a whole bunch of good stuff in there around emotional eating and healthy relationships with food and exercise and all that stuff. But that one point about channeling your inner 5-year-old really resonates with me. As I reflect back through my list of episodes, that brings me to What's Love Got to Do with It? The Importance of Self-Love with Susanna LaCoach. Susanna's message is one that we should all really think about. It's a message around our need to learn to love ourselves. Not a cringy way, but to learn to shut down those negative thoughts and start reaffirming all the things that are great about ourselves. It's something that most of us are not really good at. It ties into Mel Robbins' High Five book. And it's really about just learning to validate ourselves, learning to create a new story about how great we are and, what we've overcome and what we can achieve, and stop listening to the negative messages that often tend to be the most prominent chatter in our brains. I think just in general, it's a great message, and the conversation was good as well. So that would be one I would suggest that you check out as well. Next, I move into doing something amazing. Doesn't have to be extraordinary. It can be quite ordinary with Dr. Brittany Claiborne. This story is quite amazing. And we go through the story of Dr. Claiborne and we learn about her situation with a life-threatening problem. And it's at the tail end of her pregnancy, and she literally dies multiple times, after that while they're trying to figure it out. And eventually, she's in the hospital and she's waiting for a transplant, and the doctor tells her to do something amazing while she's waiting. And she goes out and furthers her degree right up until she gets her doctorate degree, all while she's waiting for a transplant. I mean, that in itself is pretty amazing. You're about to run out of time in your life, but then while you're waiting, you go ahead and get your doctorate degree. I mean, that is crazy, but amazing. And one of the things that I learned in the conversation with her is that all the things we do in life, even some of the smallest things we do, create this ripple effect. And doing something amazing doesn't have to be extraordinary, or I probably should say it doesn't have to be monumental. So we don't have to solve world hunger or, create world peace or figure out the ecosystem. I mean, all those things would be wonderful. But in her example, this person at the DMV checked a box on their license application that said they would be an organ donor. And that small little act of checking the box created this ripple, which allowed Brittany's life to be saved, which allowed her to go on and do this extraordinary work she's doing with people. And it just shows us that some of the things that we may think are insignificant in life and may not make a difference really can make a big difference and can really create a ripple effect all over the place. And so I felt like the discussion reminds us to live with purpose and be intentional. And you just never know how you are impacting somebody else's life around you. The next episode I want to highlight is part of a series I did on grief and loss. And the title is Grief is Love with No Place to Go, a conversation on living life after loss with Tim Begonia. And Tim is the host of his own podcast, and he focuses on helping people deal with grief. And I learned a lot in this series, but there are a couple things that stuck out the most from the episode with Tim. Not being afraid to mention or talk about the other person was one thing. Not feeling guilty for doing things that they loved is another thing. It's not like you have to ban all the things that you either did together or places that you went together or things that they really loved. It's not dishonoring them by doing those things without them. Not being afraid of not having the right thing to say to your person that's left here and who's going through the loss. Just know that it's okay to just be there, to just allow them to have somebody's presence there supporting them without a big discussion. Just show up. The discussion that we had around making sure you talk to your loved ones ahead of time, if you can, if you have that opportunity, so that you understand their wishes for themselves and your life after they're gone. Tim felt really grateful for having had the opportunity to talk with his wife before she passed. They knew that it was coming. They had time to really talk about life after she was gone, and that gave him permission. That gave him permission to live his life and not second guess every one of his decisions. And I think that was a true gift that his wife was able to give to him. So that was another suggestion that Tim put out there, if it's possible. All in all, it was a fabulous episode. It will pull at your heartstrings, but Tim is a gentle, beautiful soul, and I suggest you could listen to any of those episodes in that series if you have an interest in that area. But for sure, check out the episode with Tim that I mentioned. It was well worth listening to. All right, the next two are definitely standout favorites for me. And they both stand out because they're true lessons in resilience and perseverance. The two episodes are Surviving and Thriving After Loss, a conversation with Katie Joy Duke, and Ashley McCombs Meisel's emotional story of losing her vision. Both of these episodes they really still sit with me very strongly, and I feel that they are worth listening to for anybody. Let's just recap Katie's story. So Katie lost her baby daughter. She had a stillborn birth and then went through all of that, then the unimaginable grief that surrounded that and needing to kind of pick up your life and move on. And then a few years later to find out that she has cancer and she has to fight that battle and really fight to keep her life against this disease. And she not only fights, but she is just such a courageous soul and has such a spirit about her that just lights up any room or any conversation. And she's such a brilliant writer that her memoir is just beautiful. And to see her push through all of this really hard stuff and come out the other side. And yes, I mean, she has ups and downs like everybody else, but she's so resilient and just such a inspirational force that whole episode and her whole story and journey still today inspire me. Similarly, Ashley McCombs Meisel's story goes like this. So she was a young photographer. She's had really just started out with a very successful career. She's a young mom, pretty new marriage, and she goes blind almost instantly. And obviously, it was detrimental to her mental health for a short time there. And she felt suicidal and lost and just really couldn't get her thoughts together around how she could be a mom, never mind a photographer, but a mom, which was the one thing she wanted more than anything else in the world. And we go on to learn how not only has she found out how to be a mom, she's a thriving mom. She's an exceptional mom to her 3 boys. And she's also found purpose in being able to share her story and to show how she can still do so many things, all the things. I literally, a little off topic, but I literally saw her on a post the other day, hunting mushrooms with the boys in the woods. I mean, there's just not a thing that she doesn't do. Like, you just see her over and over and over again, just show us how she can show up even with this really, really tough thing that happened to her, this big significant loss, and yet she's rebuilt her life. She's a social media influencer. She's a blind photographer, and she's an exceptional mom. And
these stories just stay prominent in my mind. Katie and Ashley are both shining lights in this world, and they're full of hope and purpose and inspire millions of people. And seriously, if you haven't checked out those episodes, check them out. So worth a listen. And those folks are definitely worth you getting familiar with their story and following them. Really inspirational stuff. The next episode I want to highlight is fairly recent and a little bit out of the norm of what we normally talk about. It was titled Creating a Loving and Passionate Marriage That Meets Your Needs and Brings the Best Out in Your Man with Shiloh Miner. And what I really love about this episode is that so many of you loved it. It was one of the most well-received episodes. And a few of you actually went on to work with Shiloh and have reported back that your marriage and overall life has been drastically improved by working with her. Getting feedback like that and knowing that bringing her to this audience and that you were able to take advantage of connecting with her and doing work with her to make drastic improvements in your lives really lights me up. It's really, that's part of the whole purpose of what I wanted to do here was to be able to curate information, to give people hope, to give people a fast pass, if you will, to some of the information that they need to change their life. And understanding that I was able to do that with this episode really excites me. And then secondly, I would say just knowing that this is an area of interest, not one that we touch on often, but one that, again, you guys really enjoyed and it was so well received. It's probably something we'll explore a little bit more in the future. Another fan favorite was titled A Mother, Her Child, and His Drug Addiction. What messages can we learn from them? Michelle Weidenbenner is the woman that I spoke with for this episode. And the bottom line truth is that many of us have had someone or still have someone in our lives with a drug or alcohol problem. And hearing Michelle's story and the work she's doing, the book she wrote, the forums that she's created, the TED Talks that she's done, it not only was able to share some insightful information and tips and let people kind of feel seen with some of the things that they've felt and have had to go through, but I know it's been impactful for several of you. And so for that reason, I'm calling it out because I think it was a moving episode. I think it's a very tough subject to handle, no matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you are, it's a parent and a child, it's a husband and a wife, it's a family friend, whatever. Addiction is just really, really hard. And the span of control or the span of reach that it has within our lives and the things that it can touch and impact is really, really wide. And so I think anytime we can bring resources to the table to share is always a plus. So for that reason, I'm calling that out. All right, another one is supporting someone you love with dementia, an honest conversation with Carolyn Beryl. And this was part of a series that I did on dementia and aging. And I have to tell you, again, this was one of the most well-received, highest listened to episodes. I think it was, I'd have to look back, but probably ranked in the top 5. People really, really, really hung on to the story that Carolyn shared with us. And, she lays out in her book, Walking with Faye, and it was the journey of supporting her mom through dementia. And she tells it in such a raw and authentic way. It's really so moving and it touched so many of you and gave validation and suggestions that were impactful on your own journeys with aging loved ones in the family or friends. And for that reason, I'm calling it out as one of the fan favorites, one of my own favorites, but one of the fan favorites. If you have not listened to that episode, I highly, highly recommend it. And I know I'm saying that with all of them, but of course I've pulled these out because I think they're some of the best. So if you haven't listened to them, go back and listen to some of these. All right. So the last 2 I want to mention have episode titles We do not need to become a product of our own environment with Jen Potter. And do you want to create a life you love instead of one you tolerate? A discussion with whole life coach Lauren Lemieux. And both stand out. They filled us with reminders that we don't need to settle. We don't need to land where others expect us to land. We can take control of our own lives and find a life that truly lights us up. That's not a fantasy. It's totally doable. We just have to lean into it and really open ourselves up to stepping out of our comfort zone and moving towards something one step at a time. And I could go on and on and on. I really could go on and list something about all 52 of these episodes because, as I mentioned at the start, I love them all. And I think that there's something to be gained in all of them. And yes, of course, I'm a little biased. But when I look back on all 52 episodes in the year that's passed, there are a lot of common elements among these episodes and the things we talk about. But the thing that really stands out to me is how lucky I feel that I've been able to move forward in this forum. I've been able to connect with people all over the world, share their stories and expertise, offer hope and inspiration and practical tips to support all of you guys in your journey through life. Not just me, but you guys as well. And I cannot tell you how much that means to me, how much fun I'm having doing that. And I look forward to seeing what the next year brings me. I'm open to whatever that may look like. Maybe it will be, more of the same, and maybe it will be a turn off the path to a different path. I honestly am not sure yet. I'm just allowing the doors to open, allowing the path to unfold, and I continue to take the next best step that I can and move forward. And it's really all about enjoying the journey. Before I close, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people that regularly listen, provide feedback, suggest topics. You guys keep me going. You guys are my fuel. Having my own personal cheerleading squad is amazing. People like Karen and Wendy and Marie and Lorraine and Dina and Tracy and Mary Jo and Amy and Susan and Janice and so many others. You guys are the cheerleading squad that energizes me and pushes me forward. And I thank you all for being part of this, being part of the community, being there to support each other, and always having each other's backs and pushing us to rise at the same time. It's all about a supportive community that can also push us to be our best version of ourselves. And for that, I'm super thankful. Thankful for this past year, thankful for all you listeners, and I hope we can continue on with this journey. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.